All right. So I guess we might have some others joining us in a moment, but thank you guys for coming today, for showing up for this little webinar. Um, a couple of things to just note that I think everybody's like, nobody has their video right now. I think that I have it so like the setting has the videos off. Um, but just in case, I mean, I guess you could put it back on when you want to ask a question. Otherwise, at any point, if you feel like inclined to ask a question, you can either chat in the box. You can send those questions to me privately or so that everyone can see. Or if you want to unmute yourself, then you can just click the bottom left corner to unmute yourself to ask a question. But what I'd like to just start with today is answering a few questions that I've gotten pretty frequently from people about the upcoming Peru retreat. And then I'll give you guys some time to ask any other questions. And of course, if we run out of time today or something else comes up later, then you're more than welcome to send me an email or ask in any way. Um, so to start, you guys, I think, are all on my email list, perhaps. And so what I know that you have a pretty good understanding of what the retreat is and what the idea of an introvert and HSP retreat is. I don't want to spend a lot of time telling you what you already know, but just in terms of who this experience is for. Excuse me. Um, One of the things that's like inspired me to do this is just really looking at some of the incredible experiences that I've had all over the world and recognizing that some of those may not be like the typical places that introverts or highly sensitive people would travel to, but that we can go and enjoy those environments and the world really as it is, um, really with a certain supportive structure in place and surrounded by people who understand and get us. So that's like one of the things I guess I try to keep in mind or try to express to other people, that it's not about like creating the most peaceful bubble like environment where you're not going to be stimulated by anything. Obviously Machu Picchu is one of the seven wonders of the world, so there are people there. There can be quite a few people, although we've managed to get this down to going at the right time of day and I've kind of found the little spots where there aren't many people or you can just kind of do. So the vast majority of guests that come along on any of my retreats do not know each other ahead of time. I do usually have a fair amount of repeat guests. So sometimes those people know each other from past retreats and other times they don't know each other at all. And sometimes people come as friends or there's a couple or something like that, but most often I would say at least like half if not more of the groups typically end up being solo travelers. Um, and the ages really range. I tend to, like, most of the time, I tend to be one of the younger ones, and I'm 37, on these retreats. But I would say mid 20s to mid 60s would be the average age. And most of my guests that come on the introvert retreats identify as women. But I would say on every retreat, there's usually been between 2 and 4 people who identify as and I think for this particular one right now, there are 3 men left. So, but women do tend to cover men now. And I don't know what else I can answer in that respect. You guys can feel free to ask other questions. If you're welcome to sign up for double occupancy, even if you're coming as a solo traveler. So I do my best to match appropriate roommates and try to ask some questions to figure out what that means. And I'll stop with that. And then if you guys want to just take a note about any questions, well, let's go ahead and just open that up right now. Sorry, I'm not used to doing video, so bear with me, you guys. So let's go ahead and if there are any other questions about kind of what the group looks like, feel free to shoot those over now. Otherwise, I'll go on. Okay. Well, if you have other questions in a moment, you can ask those. Oh, so thank you. Yeah. So do you need to be super fit to do these retreats? So this was actually one of the questions I was going to answer next anyway. But yeah, just in terms of physical condition for these retreats. So the short answer is no. And I would say that in terms of just like level of mobility and age, there's been an immense amount of diversity in terms of, I'll answer that next question in just a moment. So you don't have to be super fit. I'll just speak real quick to altitude, because altitude is something that people worry about, but altitude does not discriminate. I've learned that the hard way, because I really didn't anticipate being so affected the first time I went to Peru as I was. And I thought that actually a lot of the other guests were going to have problems, but I would say most of them didn't. And people that were 70 years old, and people that maybe weren't used to doing a lot of physical activity, ended up feeling fine. So it really varies. Just a quick note on the altitude, and then I'll continue answering the physical fitness question. When we start, Cusco is a little over 11,000 feet, and that's where we meet up. But depending on whether you arrive the day before or arrive like that morning, sometimes it's nice to get in a day before, but the downside to that is that there's this time to kind of adjust to the altitude, where sometimes if you come in right before the retreat, then we go down into the Sacred Valley where we're staying, and that's about 2,000 feet less than Cusco, or lower than Cusco. And then going to Machu Picchu, it's closer to like 7,900 feet. So it actually gets a little bit easier. And then at the end, you go back to Cusco and sometimes experience a little altitude sickness at that point again. But I can talk a little bit more if you guys are interested just in how to prepare. I oftentimes tell people to see their doctor beforehand to look into getting a prescription for a medication called Diamox. There's also a pill that's sold over the counter in Peruvian pharmacies that's called Sorochi that can help with altitude sickness as well. But it really helps to be well rested, hydrated, and those kinds of things. And then I find that most people are feeling okay when we're at the retreat center. So obviously, though, the altitude can affect how you feel physically, right? So that's why I'm bringing this up. Not just how it can affect you in general, but like how you're feeling. Sometimes we think that we're capable of doing more and that it's not going to affect us. And sometimes it does. So, our breathing can feel a little bit more shallow and things like that. So some physical things that might not ordinarily feel like a lot of physical exertion sometimes feel like more. While we are in the valley at the retreat center and visiting areas around there is a waterfall hike that you can do from the retreat center that's about an hour or so. It's not a very difficult hike. You can take your time. You can do it on your own. The other activities that we're doing in the area may require some stairs and a little bit of up and down, but they're pretty accessible. And the big thing that I think most people ask about is Machu Picchu and Huayna Picchu. So Huayna Picchu is the small mountain that you see behind Machu Picchu in like the postcard photograph. And you have the option of hiking that small mountain, which gives you kind of just a different perspective of Machu Picchu than that postcard photograph that we'll see. So if you're visiting just the ruins of Machu Picchu, there are a fair amount of steps, but it's doable for most people. I found that most guests will just kind of self-adjust if they feel like they need more time to go up some stairs, or if they need more time just to kind of wander around on their own and not climb so many stairs. But that part is totally manageable, and I've had some people on retreats that maybe were not in lack of a better way of saying it, like greatest physical shape, that managed just fine. Huayna Picchu, on the other hand, is definitely for somebody who's like used to hiking, I would say, and also is not afraid of heights and doesn't easily get vertigo. Now, there are some videos on YouTube and pictures and stuff that make Huayna Picchu look a lot scarier than it actually is. But again, this is something that's really subjective. But you'll see, like, if you Google Huayna Picchu, you'll see these pictures of like people walking on like these little, I don't know what you call them, like almost just little rocks like sticking out of the side of a mountain with like nothing below, and it just drops down. And there's nothing that you're ever walking on I'm Huayna Picchu that looks like that. Most of the time, it's very steep, and it's about an hour going up and about the same amount going down. It's very steep. Most of the time, you have something to hang on to, there's like a metal cable that you can hang on to. There's a couple of points where that isn't available, and then you kind of just go slowly, use your hands to scoot. And so I think most people have been pretty successful to do that. Some people have felt it was a little scary. Other people have felt like it wasn't such a big deal. So it really depends on what you're accustomed to. That is an extra cost. I've decided to include that as a separate cost this time because I found I was buying them for a lot of people, and then everyone was deciding not to do it at the last minute. Sometimes out of, a group of 14, 16 people, we'd have like 2 people hiking, and then all this. And there are a limited number of people that they allow up each day, so those tickets sell out very fast, and then we don't want to take tickets that use. So just to give you an idea of the time while we're at Machu Picchu that day, so I'm not going to go into the right now unless you're curious. The day before of like traveling to Aguas Calientes, which is the town near Machu Picchu, that's kind of our jumping off point. In the morning, we'll be getting up super duper early in order to arrive before the crowds and arrive there early to make the best, the most of our experience the sunrise while the fog is lifting and all of that magic. And so the plan is to arrive at 6 a.m., enter in Machu Picchu at 6 o'clock, and then spend those first 2 hours from about 6 to 8 with our guide, Valentine, who's been working as the local guide for my retreats the last 4 times we've done this, and he's wonderful. You'll love him. He's full of a ton of knowledge and experience. So Valentine spends those first couple of hours giving you more of the history and walking around some of the ruins. And then from about, and again, this is all rough, but from about 8 to 10, you have that time just to walk around Machu Picchu on your own. And I can point you in the direction of some places where you can escape the crowds, sit pretty quietly, and just enjoy. And then at 10 o'clock, so there's specific times that you can hike Huayna Picchu, and at 10 o'clock is the time that is best for hiking because the clouds have cleared, so if you go to the top, you actually have a view. I've done it the other way, where you don't have a view. And so from about 10 to 12 is when you would hike Huayna Picchu if you're doing that. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that in an effort, I think, partially to manage the crowds and partially to probably reap the capital benefits of bringing tourists to Machu Picchu, government benefits in ways in this regard. But they've limited. It used to be that you could exit one time and come back in. So the bathroom is at the exit. So it used to be that you could exit one time, go to the bathroom, and go back in only one time. And once you go back out, then you're out for good. Now they've changed it so you cannot exit at all. And once you're out, essentially. So that, of course, makes it a little bit more challenging when you're thinking about, like, there's a lot of anxiety leading up to that, I think, sometimes for people, like, oh my God, I'm only in there, and then I might have to pee. What if I have to pee and like exit, and now I can't go back in? So I've given the option this time to you can buy an extra ticket, or if you are buying a Huayna Picchu ticket and exit and enter back in with your Huayna Picchu ticket, or you enter back in with separate Machu. And I can buy those, but it's an added cost only because I did find that as much as so many of us were worried about that this last time, when this was the last time I was there was when they implemented this, that I ended up being there for like 4 or 5 hours without having to go to the bathroom. And so that ended up being enough. So I really want to leave it up to people rather than like adding more cost without getting your input. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Um, you guys can feel free to ask other questions, and I'm going to go ahead and answer Ivan's question. So what is the best time to buy plane tickets from my experience? I would say, I mean, it really does vary, and it's one of these things like read print advice, depending on where it is. I would say usually like around 2 or 3 months before the retreat. That being said, sometimes like I haven't looked lately, but sometimes I have just like checked out flights, 6, 7 months in advance, and they also look pretty good. I think a lot of times it's such a tough one. I would say most of the time, like might be more flight options, and sometimes they're cheaper if you are like buying about 2 to 3 months out from your travel dates. But it's good just to keep an eye on them and see if they drop. It's from my city, from Chicago. I'm like really nuts when it comes to searching for flights. I scour the internet for like on yes, what sites do I use? So I use Google Flights and Kayak, and I'll usually check both because sometimes I'll find different results. Um, and then I think it's important just to recognize that those are like third-party aggregators. So there is some inherent risk if you buy with some of these, but I would say usually buying through like Kayak or Orbitz or Travelocity, those are a little better. I've heard some issues with Just Fly, so I would stay away from Just Fly. Um, I guess I don't need to go into specific issues, but I think kind of a bait and switch sort of um, system is what they've used. So, but yeah, I would say check Google Flights and check Kayak. And if you have a little bit of flexibility with like arriving a day early or staying a day after or 2 days after, then you can also enter flexibility. And I usually do suggest that people enjoy Cusco after the retreat because then you've had more time to adjust to the altitude. Oftentimes people are a little disappointed if you're wanting to do more in the beginning and you're feeling tired. Especially the flights end up being longer because you do have to make 2 stops since Cusco does not have an international airport. But yeah, I think I was saying before, I usually scour the internet before landing on flights. So I mean, don't do what I do. I waste a lot of time, but just keep your eye out. You can put up notifications and things like that. Do you guys have any other questions? All right. What else can I tell you? Um, so let me just double check first of all that I answered the other things I said I was going to. Yes. Yes, I did. So just a couple of other things. Oh, okay. So how far is Rainbow Mountain from where we are staying? That's a good question. And off the top of my head, I'm forgetting. Rainbow Mountain, I think it's like 3 hours from Cusco. So if you decide to do Rainbow Mountain, so first of all, that one can be more challenging because I think you're going to about 13,000 feet. I haven't done it yet. It's something that's been in the plans at some point, but I haven't. I've heard that the best way to do Rainbow Mountain is to stay overnight, to do the 2-day version rather than the 1 day, because the 1 day you have to like leave at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I don't know what time you arrive back, but it's a very, very full day and you're arriving when all the other tourists are arriving. I think the overnight option can be a better way to enjoy it from what I've heard. For those of you guys, you can Google Rainbow Mountain if you haven't heard of Rainbow Mountain, but it's essentially this mountain that like has these, I'm missing my words today, but it looks like rainbow coloring on the actual mountain. And I think the time of year that we'll be going is a good time, especially if you do it at the end of the, like, we're going at the end of rainy season, which sounds a little like, why wouldn't we be going in the dry season? But the truth is that it's beautiful and there's very little rain in the rainy season. So we've gotten very lucky thus far. I haven't been poured on, maybe a little drizzle, but everything's lush and green, which by the time you get to like June, even May, sometimes it's like everything's brown. So we're going at the best time. And it's less crowded. The summertime, or well, their winter is colder, and because it's higher altitude anyway, and the other and in the southern hemisphere, but it's also much busier travel at that time of year. So how safe is Peru versus other Latin American countries? I would say versus other Latin American countries, it's definitely a safer place to visit. If you have like a stop in Lima or you're planning to visit Lima, I think that there are great neighborhoods to visit and things to see in Lima, and it's like there's like amazing culinary scene there, or culinary, however people say that. But I would say in Lima, like if you're planning to go there, it's important to arrange a transfer or transportation with your hotel, just because sometimes taxis can be less safe. But as far as arriving in Cusco and the Sacred Valley, it's a very safe region. Things happen everywhere. Things happen for sure all over the United States. I live in Chicago, so we have. So a couple of other things I was just going to mention. So when we go to Machu Picchu, and I just check on time here because I said I would go to like 30 to 40 minutes. Visiting Machu Picchu, it's a 2-day trip, but we're only visiting Machu Picchu for 1 day. So that first day we leave the retreat center and we go to a town called Ollantaytambo, and there, Ollantaytambo has its own ruins that are also really spectacular. So we have some time to visit those ruins. We'll be with Valentin as well, so he'll share his knowledge of that area. You can walk around the town. And then we'll be taking the train from Ollantaytambo to Aguascalientes. And that evening, there's pretty much time for dinner. There's some hot springs that are not that introvert and HSP friendly, but yeah, we'll just be there that evening and then be getting up early the next day. And at the we'll basically be spending the morning from about 6 a.m. to around noon at Machu Picchu, then heading back to Aguascalientes, having lunch, and after lunch we'll catch the train back to Ollantaytambo, and then Ollantaytambo back to the retreat center. It does make for a long day. I'll answer that in a second. So it does make for a long day, but there's certain things that I find like are the only practical ways to do things on these trips. So there's, it's hard to make it. It doesn't make any sense to stay in Aguascalientes for 2 nights. It's not that exciting of a town. It's rather touristy. And so I think the really important thing to keep in mind is that, again, like some of these are longer travel days, but what makes this experience different, I guess, is that one, like when we're all done and going back on that train, everybody understands usually that like most of us are pretty tired and want to rest, and so there isn't like this need to continually engage. And also, before going to Machu Picchu, we have that as a full free day if you want to relax. And then we also have a day to relax at the retreat center when we come back. So it is padded with that recharge time. Let's see, Pam asked, are we taking the Inca train or Peru rail? So Peru rail, there's a few different trains with that, and there's also like the Hiram Bingham train, which is like really luxurious. I have not been on that one. But with Peru Rail, there are two trains actually, Vista Dome and Expedition. There might be another one. I'm leaving out. But originally I was booking Vista Dome because it's a little bit of a step up. Like you get a tablecloth and like a fancy snack or something. And I realized that this dome is much louder and much more obnoxious, and it's still nice and comfortable, but a quieter experience. So depending on like what's available and the times that we go, sometimes I do end up having to book Vista Dome going there, but then on the return we take the Expedition, and those are both through rail. One of the other things that we're doing while we're there, one thing you'll notice if you've been following just these retreats for a while, you'll notice the price went up a little bit this year, and that's because I added an extra night. So we're doing 8 nights instead of 7 this time. The 7 nights is totally doable, but everybody seemed like, I think some of the feedback that I've gotten is that people wish it were a little bit longer. And I think especially with that 2-day trip to Machu Picchu, it allows a little bit more time to really just like land and be at the retreat center, enjoy some of the other sites, and not be like too busy. So that's why we're doing 8 nights. So I'm still including what I've done in the past, which is a day of visiting some of the other sites in the region, including Tintero, where we visit a women's weaving cooperative and learn how they dye the alpaca and llama wool, and then how they use the backstrap loom weaving technique to use their textiles. We'll visit there, and then we're also visiting a site called called Morai, which is another sacred site. There are these ancient agricultural circles. I don't want to say a lot more because I think it's really special when Valentin says all of this, with his background in being local and indigenous, and it's a much more meaningful experience coming from him. But that's also a really magnificent site, and more off the tourist track as well. So we usually find there aren't many people there when we go. And then we also visit these salt mines that day, which have been around for centuries, and it's one of the only like salt, I think it actually is the only salt mine in the world where the salt is mined using terraces. So the water comes in through the stream and they've terraced that off, and again, learn more about that process when we go there. It's just a spectacular site and how they do it, and watching people work, and it's pretty just. And I think the other thing, I don't have the itinerary up in front of me, but the one thing I'm including this year that'll be a little different is that we are also, like the first day we're doing a short little trip over to Valentin, our guide's farm, and enjoying a traditional Pachamanca lunch with him, which is a very, very special experience. All of the food is cooked in a fire under the ground, under the earth, and absolutely delicious. So we're doing this. And I know that sounds like a lot, but you'll still have several days and free time, even that half-day tour. You'll have other time to relax, get a massage, visit some other sites on your own. And as always, you can opt out of anything that you want. So any other questions before we close? I know with the free Zoom account, which is what I'm using right now, I only have 40 minutes anyway, but it seems like it's 2:30. So we always end early unless there are other questions. I'm trying to think if there's anything else for me to say. I don't think so. I mean, the retreat center makes amazing food, mostly vegetarian, but if you're a meat eater, we can accommodate that. We can accommodate whatever dietary restrictions are necessary, without judgment. And Cusco has some of the most amazing food that I have ever tasted in this world, especially if you're vegan or vegetarian. Oddly enough, they have like the most beautiful and creative salads and other dishes that I've ever experienced. I wish Chicago had these options. Um, No, we don't. Not quite. Somehow falling short. But yeah, I guess part of it is also the food being amazingly fresh. All right. Unless there are any other questions, you can either chat or unmute yourself. Otherwise, we'll bring this to a close. All right. Thank you. Thank you guys for joining. I know it's a Sunday and people aren't available, but it's great for those of you guys that did show up today. I really appreciate it because you gave me someone to talk to. And I know that there are other people that told me they could not be on today, but really wanted to listen to the recording. So thank you for providing that where everybody else can listen to the recording. And thank you for the opportunity. I hate doing video. I really do. Like I always, as simple as it is, even when it's like the things I'm used to talking about in conversation, I always feel really nervous. And so thank you for the opportunity to speak to you guys via Zoom today. So with that, I will go ahead and close. Thank you very much. If you have any other questions, please let me know. Right now, for those of you guys that I think you're aware, there's just the one set of dates right now for Peru from March 27th through April 4th. So if you're not, I know a couple of you guys are already signed up, but if you're not, the early bird pricing ends at the end of this month. But feel free to reach out with any questions. And also, as always, payment plans are available and I don't charge anything extra for that. So just you to know that as well. All right, thank you.